Imagine this. You're cleaning out an old box, and you find two dusty cassette tapes. Purple and red, the cheap kind. Your first thought might be to just toss them. But what if those tapes were the absolute last physical link to a piece of national history? The only surviving recording of a pioneering work of art that was almost completely lost.
Well, that's exactly the story we're getting into today.
Yeah.
We are doing a deep dive into the history and the legacy of Hung Lip-pu.
It's for our listeners who know the characters.
Right. It was staged all the way back in 1971, and it's really seen as Malaysia's first original Chinese operetta.
Oh.
And the sources we have, old program notes, casting lists, and these incredible photos of the recovered tapes, they just paint such a vivid picture.
And that's our mission here. We want to unpack the sheer ambition of this thing. Because this wasn't just, a local community play. This was a foundational moment. We need to get into its groundbreaking nature and why its rediscovery decades later is so important.
It really is a story that starts with a clear civic purpose. So let's start there with the production itself and the powerful message it was sending at the time.
Okay, so we're talking about Hang Li-po. It's a big 4-act operetta. And it ran from November 20th to the 28th, 1971, at the Town Hall in Kuala Lumpur.
The Dewan Bandaran, yep. And get this, 9 straight nights, completely sold out.
Wow.
That alone tells you what a massive event this was. It was put on by the Dramatic Art Society, or Perkumpulan Seni dan Sandawara, which had been around since 1963.
And the sources make it really clear this wasn't just art for art's sake.
Not at all. It was very intentional. It was created to be the first original Chinese vocal work in Malaysia, and its stated goal was to promote goodwill and racial harmony.
I think the genius of it is how they used national history to do that. The story comes straight from the Sejarah Malayanal.
It's really revered text.
Exactly. And it's set in the 15th century Malacca Sultanate. So right away, they're placing this Chinese art form inside a classic foundational Malay story.
And what's so fascinating is how explicit they were about the message. They didn't hide it. They consciously designed the story to deliver 4 key ideas. It was almost like civic education through music.
Right, I saw that in the program notes. The 4 points are laid out so clearly. First, loyalty to the king with Sultan Mansur Shah as the symbol.
Yep. Second was love for the motherland, with Malacca at the height of its power as the backdrop.
The third one was about fighting foreign aggression. It shows Malays and Chinese uniting to defend the country.
And that 4th point is maybe the most important, especially for 1971, the spirit of interracial goodwill, the whole marriage between Princess Hang Li-po from China and the Sultan. It was meant to be this beautiful historical symbol of unity.
So given the political climate back then in the late 60s and early 70s, was this focus on interracial goodwill, a brave artistic statement, or was it more of a careful, necessary thing to do for a big public show?
I think it was both. And that's what makes it so brilliant. Of course, it was necessary to ground a big public work in themes of unity. But to do it using a Western operetta form with a story from the Malay annals, that was incredibly ambitious. It wasn't just playing it safe. It was an active, beautiful contribution to this idea of a shared national story.
Okay, so how did they actually build this message into the drama? Can we walk through the plot?
We can, yeah.
Yeah.
Act I kicks things off in 1467 AD. It's all about the pageantry and the anticipation of Princess Hang Li-po arriving in Malacca.
Setting the scene?
Exactly. Then Act 2, that's where the drama really ignites. It's Sultan Mansur Shah's 30th birthday party. Everything seems perfect, but then this character, Prince Samloko Balutlik, tries to kidnap the princess.
The first test of that unity.
The very first.
Yeah.
And the plot gets foiled. Then Act 3 it kind of jumps forward 6 months. It shows this moment of quiet happiness. The Sultan and princess are married. She's integrated into the court, teaching her handmaids new dances. It's the visual of that harmony they promised.
But it doesn't end there. There's a tragic turn.
A very tragic turn. In Act 4, Samoloko comes back. He attacks Bukit China, and the operetta ends with Princess Hang Li-po and her handmaid, Wei Po, being killed while defending their new home.
So that central story of unity, it ends in sacrifice.
It does. It's a very heavy ending, but it's patriotic. The message is that unity isn't just passive. It requires sacrifice against common threats. And pulling off that kind of powerful story, Well, it took years of work from the creators behind the scenes.
And we really have to talk about that dedication. This was a true labor of love. I mean, 6 years of work just from the composer and the scriptwriter before anyone even stepped on stage.
It's incredible. Let's start with the composer, Chan Lok Hung. He was a retired teacher, and what's amazing is that he was completely self-taught.
No formal training.
None. But he was already good enough to have won composition contests run by Radio Malaysia.
Yeah.
The fact that he took on scoring 22 songs for a 4-act operetta is just immense.
And it took him 6 years to do it.
6 years from script to final score. And according to the reviews from the time, his real strength was his grasp of orchestral accompaniment, which is, I mean, that's incredibly complex stuff. But the really brilliant part was how he wove in local Malay musical elements.
Ah, so that's the synthesis. He wasn't just copying a Western style.
Not at all.
Yeah.
He was localizing it. The operetta had 4 cultural dances, and the sources specifically praise how he included 2 distinct Malay dances in the score. That musical choice says everything about the mission.
And then you have the scriptwriter, Liu Ko.
Right, a history scholar. He got the idea way back in 1963 based on historical records and spent the next 3 years shaping it into the final script.
Yeah.
He really did his homework to give it that historical weight.
And Liu Ko made a very important structural decision. He framed it as a light operetta.
That is such a critical point. A full-blown opera is sung from start to finish. It's incredibly demanding on the singers. A light operetta, on the other hand, has spoken dialogue between the songs.
Which makes it much more accessible.
Exactly. It was a pragmatic, brilliant choice.
Yeah.
It meant they could stage something on a grand scale without needing a dozen world-class opera singers, which, were not exactly easy to find locally at the time. It lowered the bar just enough.
So you have this huge local project, years in the making, but what really pushed it over the top was the star power. The leads were genuine global pioneers.
This is where the story gets really amazing. The soprano, playing Princess Hang Li Po, was a woman named Florence Pong, born in Hong Kong in 1935, but by this time she was an international talent. She had trained in Australia at the NSW Conservatorium of Music.
And her story in Australia it's just astounding. We have to stop on this for a second. In 1957, when she's only 22 years old, she's invited to join the Australian Elizabethan Theatre Trust Opera Company, which made her the first person of Asian descent to ever appear on the Australian opera stage.
It's a historic breakthrough. This isn't just a bit of trivia. Her reviews were incredible. She starred in The Land of Smiles, but her big role, the one that made her famous, was playing Cio-Cio-San in Puccini's Madama Butterfly.
And the praise she got for that role it was off the charts. Sir Bernard Heinz, who is this legendary figure in Australian music, he flat out said she was, quote, the best butterfly he had seen in Europe or elsewhere.
I mean, when a conductor of that stature says that, you're dealing with a truly world-class artist.
Absolutely. So for her to come back in 1971 to star in a brand new local production, that's a massive endorsement.
It really is. She brought that sophisticated European vocal technique with her. The sources specifically mention her bel canto style.
Okay, for those of us who aren't opera buffs, what does bel canto actually mean? What would the audience have heard?
Bel canto just means beautiful singing. It's a style that prizes vocal agility, a really smooth and even tone, and these elegant flowing musical lines, what the sources call legato singing. So she wasn't just hitting notes, she was shaping them with this seamless beauty that would have elevated the entire performance.
And playing opposite her as the Sultan was the tenor To Chor Soon. He had a great nickname, the Nanyang Caruso.
A fantastic nickname. And he was a major local figure. He was actually a graduate of Nanyang University's very first economics class back in '59. But his real passion was singing. By '71, he'd already starred in 8 English-language operettas in KL and Singapore.
So he was a veteran of the local scene. But what made his voice so special?
It was the training. He spent 8 years in intensive training with a German pastor named William Zimmermann. That's not a hobby. That is serious professional-level dedication. And the result was this incredible clarity of diction, no matter what language he was singing in.
So we have this amazing cast, a 6-year creative process, sold-out shows. It was a landmark success. But for decades, the actual sound of that performance, it was basically gone.
It was, and that led to real historical questions. Scholars wondered if the self-taught composer, Chan Lok Hung, had actually used a full orchestra, or if the performance was really as good as people remembered. Parts of the score were missing, so there was this huge gap in this historical record.
And this is where the story hits its own dramatic second act.
It really does. In 2011, a scholar is doing an interview, And that one conversation leads to the discovery of the only known recording of that 1971 premiere. 2 little German-made AGFA 60-minute cassette tapes.
It's just incredible to think of them just sitting in a box with the belongings of one of the composer's students who had passed away.
They were literally inches from being thrown in the trash. It was just sheer luck. And the dedication of another voice teacher who eventually got them and realized what they might be that saved them.
And if you look at the photo of the tapes, there's another detail that could have doomed them. The handwritten label on the box has a mistake. A single miswritten character. It says Aja instead of
A single stroke of a pen. Someone could have easily seen that and just tossed it aside thinking it was something else.
So this recording, 1 hour and 48 minutes, was digitized. And that process just answered all those old questions instantly.
Instantly. It proved that Chan Lok Hung's composition and orchestration were absolutely top-notch. He'd used a full, sophisticated orchestral arrangement. It was all there.
And, of course, it confirmed the legacy of the stars. You could finally hear the incredible vocal power of Florence Pong and Cio-Cio-San, proving this really was a high-level performance, especially for Southeast Asia in the 1970s.
So when you connect all the dots, Hang Lee Po was so much more than just a hit show. It was this monumental work that blended Chinese and Malay culture with a Western art form, all brought to life by local artists who were legitimate global talents.
And this rediscovery, it isn't just for the history books. The source material mentions that it's fueling new academic interest. There's apparently an academic salon scheduled for 2026 just to discuss this whole story. It shows this renewed passion for understanding these foundational cultural works.
It really just shows that sometimes the greatest legacies, the actual sound of history, can be found sitting in a friend's old cabinet, saved by nothing more than luck and 2 cheap cassette tapes.